What are you smoking this time?
I have a Rojas Street Taco Cinco de Mayo edition. What are you smoking?
My go-to Macanudo Cafe. So I have a serious question, though. When is it okay to put up the Christmas decorations? Or when do they go up in your house?
I think in our house it goes up the week of Thanksgiving. And it's only because of our career.
Yeah.
Like in the end of a
Get the
volleyball
time
season,
off. Yeah.
have time off. And then like I have had time to kind of decompress from the volleyball season. Also, I have time off of work, so I'm not having to do it maybe on a Saturday or a Sunday.
Right.
I think if we weren't teachers, we probably would have already had them up.
We usually do it pretty early. This is kind of late for us. Although we have a kid in the neighborhood who does our Christmas lights on our house for less than my ER deductible. So that's how I make that decision.
Okay.
I don't want to be 30 feet in the air putting lights on the house. I'm too old for that. So, and he did it on Halloween. So he was here day of Halloween on October 31st, putting them on the house. And we've had them on ever since. But we normally, like, first or second Saturday in November, get the tree out and decorate and do everything else.
Yeah, I've never been like, I don't really care
Yeah.
in our house. But usually by the time it's time to take them down, I'm ready for them to come down.
Mm-hmm.
More than I am about it being super excited about them going up.
I am definitely ready for it to be over when it's over. Like, I like the lead up. It's fun. Christmas is great. But after Christmas, it's like, put it all up, clean the house, get back to work. Like, I'm ready to go. I'm that way on vacations too. The last day of vacation, I'm packing everything up and I'm ready to go.
And I'm also like, I really, really like vacation, but I'm also really, really ready to go home.
Yeah.
Especially when you have as many kids. And I know you have more than me, but like we have 3 kids, and it's just most of the time I'm ready to go.
Yeah. A vacation with kids is like a little bit of fun and a lot of work. But they have a great time.
We went on our first, like, because we got married so young, we went on our first, like, actual vacation as a couple, because we literally got married before we could do anything.
Yeah.
And so we went on our first one this summer to Mexico. It was the best experience of my life. Like, just spending time with your spouse alone just is something that I never really realized that I was, like, not missing it, but, like, I had never experienced that before on a vacation setting. You know, like we go on dates or whatnot, but the other stuff is just, it's hard to do, like, it's just hard to enjoy each other's company even when you go to the beach with your little kids and you're like, okay, where are they? You're more worried about that stuff.
Yeah, you're constantly keeping children alive instead of enjoying your vacation.
We celebrated 20 years.
Oh, and that's a big one.
So, well, for my 40th, our 20th, and then for her 40th, we're going to Georgia. Just the two of us. And we needed that. We need it. It's good. So I want to talk about my week before we start. So the Cattle Mills Foxes made it to the Elite 8 volleyball, Division 2. Like, it's a whole different experience when your daughter's playing versus just being the coach. And man, like, I have postseason grief every year. Like, it's a hard, like, unless you've really coached, I'm not saying just your kid, just in general, but like postseason grief is a real thing. Like, you grieve the process, you grieve the team, and then you grieve coaching. But then also, like, there's this little bit of joy because, like, it's like you finally get to go back to your life a little bit. Yeah. But then also, like, you're still just grieving. It's so sad. Like, it's a sad, exciting, but then also, like, to throw your kid in there, your personal children, it's a different experience, man.
So, yeah, I would expect it to be different. Coaching your kid and making it that far versus just being a coach and making it that far. Like, do you have anything specific that is different about it? You feel different about it?
I was way more nervous. Like, I'm pretty even keel as a coach, but I was way more nervous because I didn't want her experience to be cut short.
Yeah.
Versus, like, for me, and this is going to sound boastful, but like I've been to the state tournament coaching in basketball. And volleyball's a little different as far as like the skill and things like that. But the sport in general, obviously too. But it's I just didn't want it to be over for her.
Yeah.
You know? I didn't want it to be over for our family.
Yeah.
Because, like you invest a lot of time, you invest a lot of money, a lot of effort in trying to make sure that your kid is prepared for the moment. I mean, she played well. So, me and my wife are not completely over it yet. It'll take us some time. But we'll be fine. I mean, she's a great kid. And it would be different if, like, she had no potential after high school or whatever, and this was going to be the end-all, be-all for her. But it's not. She's got a great life ahead of her.
Yeah, it's good.
How about you? How's your week?
It was a tough week. So, about 2 weeks ago, the weekend, my wife was in the hospital, emergency surgery, for a complication from a previous surgery about 4 weeks before that. And at that same time, my granddad was in ICU, and he's 98 and has had a long life, and has kind of gone through this cycle of kind of having some health issues, and then they get better, and he's great, you know. But they did tell us when he was going home that time that it was probably going to be days, could be a few weeks, but it was getting close. So we kind of knew that, expected that. Plus, he's 98.
Like, I'm not laughing like out of.
I get it. No,
I'm laughing out of like, that's an amazing life.
Yes.
Like,
and you get to, I'm not going to say you expect it, but there's a certain point where it's a different.
Yeah.
To lose a grandparent at 98 years old. And so about a week later, so actually on Veterans Day, he actually passed away. Peacefully, went to sleep, just normal. And it's great that he's a veteran.
Yeah.
He's a
what war did he fight in?
World War II.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So he did not see combat in Japan, but he enlisted in 44. That's when he turned 18. Born in 1926. And was on the ship on the way to Japan when they accepted defeat. But he still went.
Yeah.
And so he has pictures of being over there.
That's amazing.
And just bomb-ridden and destroyed towns.
So both of my grandfathers served. My maternal grandfather, he was in the Merchant Marines, and so he was a financial analysis for the Navy. And so he did that. Then my other grandfather on my dad's side, paternal grandfather, he was stationed at Dyess Air Force Base in Abilene.
Oh, wow.
And so he worked on the C-130s and eventually what became the B-1 bombers. So he, neither one of them saw service in terms of like combat, but they both served.
Yeah, and he basically got out in 46. So he enlisted in 44. Went over, came back, and was discharged at the very end of 46, like this time of year, November. And they were married in November, him and my grandmother, in 1946. And
they got married at 20.
Yeah.
That's kind of old for that
time. It is. Well, she was 4 years younger, so I guess she was 16. Which back then I actually was still a little on the older scale. They were farmers, and one of the reasons he went to the Army was to get off the farm. And then when he came back, he went to Dallas and started a business. You know, never went back to the farm until he bought land for himself and started running cattle. So, but they were both farmers.
Now, is this your dad's?
My dad's dad.
Okay. Yeah. It's never easy. I lost both my grandmothers in the same day. And like both of them were not in great health, but they both died on the same day. I did the math once to see it, what would the number be that they would both die on the same day, and it was like 1 in 2 trillion or something like that, which is kind of crazy.
It is
to think about.
My mom's mom passed away this past summer at 100. So long life there as well.
Yeah. Not an easy transition in our podcast.
No, I mean, it was a great life. He's a veteran. You know, lived a great life, started a business, ran a business, had land, farmed, had cattle, ran cattle through his 90th birthday, you know, he was always going. So it's good. Good American. He wanted to vote, I'm gonna segue with this. It was interesting. So about a year ago, a little over a year ago, we moved him into an assisted living kind of. He has his own kind of apartment kind of thing. He until that point he had lived in their house on their land like all that time. And after my grandmother passed away in 2020 by himself, and so he finally decided he wanted to go to like an assisted living, kind of have an apartment type thing. So we did that, and we came time to vote. It's like when early voting's already started, and they were sending around the bus to pick up the seniors. They're going to take them to the polling place and let them all vote, which I think is a great thing, you know.
Right.
And they bring the iPad out to them and like walk through it with them and help them make all their selections and all this, that, and the other. So I thought that was great. But his address hadn't changed. He was in the wrong precinct.
Oh, no.
And so he wasn't able to, you know.
Oh, no.
So yeah,
we didn't get to this one on the first one. So my wife had to do a mail-in ballot because something came back wrong on her address, and she had been removed from the voter registry.
Wow.
Which I didn't even know they could do that.
They started. That's more of a recent thing.
Okay.
To be diligent about.
Yeah, and I mean, like in all fairness, we had moved quite a bit of times over the past decade, and just kind of been in the same spot for a while. But she was able to mail in, and I don't know if we've gotten the final confirmation that she did get to vote or it did count or what, but I mean, I'm sure the people were super nice, super, super nice about it, and like very they explained the process very clearly, which was cool.
We had moved and I didn't change my registration, probably because I didn't update my license in time. I don't know what happened, but I explained to them. They said, well, you're not, because they always ask you, is this still your address whenever you show them your ID, because in Texas you have to show your ID to vote.
Which I fully believe every state in the country should have.
I don't understand why you wouldn't. It's a privilege.
It's a common sense thing.
It is. So, and they told me, well, I was like, oh, no. And so they let me fill out a provisional ballot. Yeah. So it was fun.
All right. Let's talk cabinet.
Well, that's been exciting.
Boy, has it not. We ended last week talking about the secretary, chief of staff, Susan Wiles. Is that how you say her name?
Susie Wiles.
Susie Wiles. And like, I was reading about it today, and they were talking about how Trump just went through his chief of staff last year. And I don't remember, like, a lot of Trump's presidency. I just remember the midnight tweets. Yeah. Right. That's a lot of things that I remember. And so like I've been being a lot more diligent since COVID, honestly. And about like, how does the president work? How does government work? How does this affect me directly? Right. And so even though I'm a teacher in a government, I've taught government before, so I understand how the process works, but like, I didn't really truly understand like how even the cabinet works. Like, how do they select those people? Who chooses those? So I did some research today. So in order to be a cabinet member, you have to be first presented to the committee of said appointment. So for example, when Tulsi Gabbard is going to be the director of national intelligence, is that right?
Yeah, DNI, yep.
So she is going to be put in front of a committee of people that are experts in their field, in said field. Now, I'm not exactly sure how the chief of staff works. I think that may be just a little bit different. But, for example, like Vivek is going to have to go through that process. Gates is going to have to go through that committee process. Then it goes to the Senate hearings. This is where it gets a little interesting, right, in terms of how that process works, because those guys could essentially say no.
So Tulsi for DNI would have to go before the Senate Intelligence Committee before she gets up for confirmation by the full Senate. But you're saying before that there's a separate committee of intelligence experts.
I don't want to say experts because I couldn't find exactly. I mean, I researched for maybe 2 or 3 hours just trying to figure out exactly who was on the committee, and it just said representatives of government. So I'm going to assume, which is kind of hard to do sometimes, that these people are the experts in their field. Then it goes to the committee of the Senate members.
Right, because like the Judiciary Committee confirms or gets Supreme Court nominees and all judge nominees out of committee before they go to the full Senate. Okay,
Correct.
I'll follow you.
And then the president has to obviously sign off on it after that.
Right.
So it is a check. There is a check and balance
Yeah.
in there, at least within the two branches of the government. And if we want to dive deep into appointments and things like that, we can go back all the way to the very first Supreme Court hearing, Marbury versus Madison, and that, midnight appointments and stuff like that. But so I want to talk about Chief of Staff first. Have you done any research on her at all?
Just cursory, kind of came up through Florida, some state chair type work there, and then ran Trump's campaign. But it's not uncommon, at least from my research, to find that your campaign manager becomes your chief of staff.
Yeah.
So that's not always the case, but a lot of times that is the case. And I think for anybody who has watched this show, The West Wing, it's TV, right? But I think they do a good job, from what I understand, of describing the chief of staff's role. The chief of staff has a massive role. They make decisions. They're meeting with top brass, top officials, and kind of giving a go, no-go before it gets to the president. They have a lot of sway about what gets to his desk or what they handle themselves.
And House of Cards does a good job with that, too.
Yeah,
I don't know if you watched that or not.
Yes, I did. Yeah.
And I think that she seems, anything that I've read about her, seems to be level-headed, seems to know how to handle Trump. The article I was reading on Politico said that they didn't believe that she would be run off by his, aggressive behavior at times, which, I mean, he's a businessman.
Yeah.
So, of course, he's going to have some aggressive moves at certain times. So I get it. But I'm excited to see how her leadership her undertones of her leadership kind of flow out of Trump, because I think that we won't see those midnight tweets. I don't think we'll see that anymore. And there's another reason for that we'll get to in just a minute.
Yeah.
But I think that with this pick, because this was the first one that he made official.
Right.
I think that also was a statement to those of us paying attention, like, hey, I'm taking this serious.
Yep. It's also why, as a sidebar, I think that they are fighting so hard in Pennsylvania, because Casey still hasn't conceded to McCormick, who is the slim margin, but the AP and everyone else has called the race and said McCormick won.
Right.
McCormick was there whenever they voted on Senate Majority Leader earlier in the week. Like, he's setting up his office in Washington, going about business as usual, but Bob Casey still has not conceded. And I think, and it is a slim margin, and they are going to do a recount, a recertification. And there is a story where in a couple counties they're allowing disqualified ballots to be counted, even though the state Supreme Court has said these ballots are disqualified. So outright defiance of the law. I don't know what's going to happen there. But I think, just to get to the original point, why they're fighting that is because if McCormick does win and you have a 53-47, you can have 3 senators go rogue. Yeah. And you're going to have Lisa Murkowski and Susan Collins are going to vote against some of these. They could anyway as Republicans. And then if you have a third one, which unfortunately I'm sad to say could be John Cornyn of the great state of Texas, you still have J.D. Vance to break the tie. But if you don't have McCormick in Pennsylvania and you only have a 52-48 Senate,
that's a huge difference.
Then Lisa Murkowski, Susan Collins are known, plus they're not running again, so they are known to stir the pot a little bit and be much more moderate. And you have to bring J.D. Vance in, but if you get one more Republican senator to turn on one of these nominations, it doesn't even go to J.D. Vance. They just fail. Yeah. So I think that's why they're pushing so hard in Pennsylvania.
I think, too, that I was watching I should have written his name down, but I can't remember. And it was on one of the big box TV shows that they were showing a clip of this Republican from Texas saying, Trump telling us how high to jump and we just need to do it. And I don't think that is an approach that needs to be had. I think that there needs to be pushback. Like, I think that common sense must prevail. End of statement. If something doesn't make sense, then why are we doing it? And that's been the whole frustration for me over the last 8 years.
Mm-hmm.
Like, even into some of Trump's stuff that he did, like, it just doesn't make sense. Like, how can you do some of the things that we're doing? And it's like, we went so far away from either side making common sense decisions. Like, let's get back to that. Like, that's what I'm excited about. Like, like her being the first one, that makes sense to me. Well,
Yes.
he ran his campaign management, her campaign. She has a history in media and a history in running big ticket items.
Right.
So that makes sense to me.
Right.
Why? Okay, let's go to the next one, the Doge. I know that was down further on the list. But
see, I don't think those guys, like the chief of staff isn't Senate confirmed, and I don't think the Doge guys are going to be
I don't
Senate
think
confirmed.
that is either. That's
because
why I
they're
went to them
complete
next.
outsiders.
Yeah. But so I read today that Vivek and Musk both came out and said that they believed that they could shave the federal. Hold on, I want to make sure I get this right. That they could reduce the federal budget by $2 trillion in 1 year.
Yeah, I saw that.
That's wild. And so, like,
That
okay,
seems
you're
excessive.
thinking to yourself, like, okay, how are they going to do this? So then, like, let's go to the history of Musk, right? He buys Twitter.
Mm-hmm.
He's not using taxpayer money. He's using his own money, right?
Right.
He cuts the staff and the budget by 80%. So they're only running at 20% capacity. And less than a year after they've purchased it, they're growing.
Right.
So how can we look at him and say, hey, you can't do this? When it comes out today, I don't know how much news you read today, the Pentagon failed their 7th.
Yes. They always
budget.
fail their audit.
But how is that? Why
I'm not dismissing it, but I'm an auditor, so I understand this.
Okay, that's one of the things I wanted to talk about too. Like, explain it to me.
They cannot. There's several items, but essentially, and a government audit is different from what I do. Government audits are a totally different animal. You either love them and you become a government auditor, or you go audit other commercial businesses, public or private. I don't audit governments, but I have in the past when I was coming up and learning. So it's a totally different animal, but essentially there is a material amount of funds, and a large amount is what that means, an amount that is significant and would make a difference to the reader of the CAFR, the government financial statements, that would make a difference to them because that they can't account for. Like,
So can you give me an
could have
example?
been spent on
okay.
normal things that are necessary, but they literally can't account for it. Like, they don't know where it went. They don't know what it was spent on or what happened to it.
Is that like
It's like a free-for-all. I mean, it's like...
Is that like a black box thing? Like, they don't want to tell us because
No, they have to tell the auditors.
Okay.
Like, the auditors have full access to look at those things. So they have clearances if they're auditing the DOD, and they can see where actually the money was actually spent. And they're looking at more or less confirming those balances. So the government says just X line item on the DOD budget. They say we spent this much money, or we have this much in assets. And the auditor comes in and says, prove it.
Okay.
And so they're trying to prove it and they can't.
Okay.
That's where the audit has failed.
Okay.
So it's
So
just a lot of waste, which is not
surprising.
surprising.
Is that to scale? Like, okay, so you're going to see some federal agencies who have a smaller budget have the same percentage of failure, or is it always going to be a fail? Is there a way to pass it? I guess is my point. Is it always a fail?
No. They can pass it. Yeah, you have governments all over the place who are audited every single year and pass their audits with what we call an unqualified opinion, that means it's good. There's no,
Okay.
we don't have to put any qualifications
Okay,
on your
that makes
financial
sense.
statements. Like it's good. And so, and I think there's a lot of emphasis on cut for Elon and Vivek, right? I think there will be some cutting. I think there will be some departments that go away, but I think the majority of it is, how are we running efficiently? How are we running inefficiently?
Right.
And I heard a guy talking today, just something about that Europe does medical records much differently than we do, and how some of our stuff is so much more paper, and like that may not be a good example, maybe a good example. I don't know how deep the problem is, but it's those types of things. Like Vivek did a long interview on the Sunday shows, and I watched clips of it, and that's what he's talking about is he said, we're mainly looking for these inefficiencies and things that already exist. Yes, there will be divisions, departments, things that can be completely cut. But aside from that, where are some really huge inefficiencies? And like come on, I bet they're all over the place.
Yeah. So let's hop into the Department of Education, because that's been all over the news.
Yeah.
And that personally affects both of us.
Yeah.
Potentially. Right. So one of the things that I was reading not too long ago was the fact that the Department of Education only requires the employees in Washington to work twice a month. So they only have to go into the office twice a month. So that to me is a waste. Why is that person even an employee? Now, maybe they could be moved to a different area of the country, or maybe to a different state, or into a different house, or different under a different umbrella, and be more functional and more thing like that. So just that right there tells you that.
Right.
I don't believe they're going to get rid of the Department of Education. Okay, now, are they going to change directly what's going to happen with it? Probably. Is there going to be some adjustments to it? Probably.
I think I can defund it. And not defund it entirely, but defund sections of it to where it's like you can't have people coming in twice a month. You're going to have to, you can't pay that many salaries for inefficient people.
Right.
Like, here's your work product. Here's your FTEs that you're allowed to do that, to be able to perform this task. Now these people are going to have to work and get it done with 80 people instead of 1,000. I don't know, whatever the number is.
And I think that government waste is so obvious.
Yes.
Right?
When you think of a government worker, what do you think about? Just like slow and
it takes forever
inefficient.
to get anything done.
Yes.
And I because I have family that work for the government, and it's like I'm also very careful too, right? Because I don't know exactly what people do or what jobs they have and how they function in their daily jobs, and I don't want anybody to lose their paycheck either. You know what I mean? But at the same time, it's like I literally have to go to work every day.
Yeah.
There's no days off for me. Like, I have to go into a classroone.
That's the odd part about it, is you're essentially a government employee.
Yeah, but I don't get government. Well,
you
that's
and-
another
and-
topic for another day.
But I mean, I would say
day.
the perception is that teachers work their tails off. You know, it's a different perception, but I think that's how Democrats, liberals, media will spin it. When these cuts start happening, they'll start spinning how many jobs, how people are out of work because of it.
So we're going to do a deeper dive into that later, like when we get to the Texas legislation stuff, because that started on Tuesday of last week. But I just don't see how. There's too many times where the Supreme Court has said you have to fund this, you have to fund this under equal protection clause, you have to fund this. And so, I mean, even just the Brown versus Board of Education, you have to do these things.
That's the thing. Like, I think, were you finished with your thought?
Hold on.
We both have strong opinions about this.
and I just, like, I think that, like, first off, we live in a very conservative part of the country where our state, now, I have a lot of friends that are teachers that are going to listen to this. Our state sucks at funding our local districts at times. Okay. And again, I don't want to, I'm going to, we haven't had a budgetary raise since 2018. Like, and then we want to be all big and bad about the state of Texas, how we don't want the federal money, except for we've been taking it since 2020 and we haven't done anything at the state level. Right. And I don't have a very big, like, I don't understand the big picture, right? Or I don't understand it enough. But what I do know is, like, I see school districts all across our area struggling with growth from other states, and our state isn't doing anything to help it. Right. We're pushing the vouchers. We're doing all those things. And I know we don't want to hop into that because that's a topic in itself. But it's like, we have to do something to help them. And if we're going to say, okay, let's do away with the Department of Education, well, then the state of Texas has to step up and do their part too.
Right. I think it's similar to what we've talked about as kind of our vision and our aim and where we're headed with this podcast, is that complete elimination of the Department of Education is probably not the answer, but there probably is an answer that's somewhere in between, definitely where it's running and then where it could be. And so there's nuance there, right? There's some both and, like, you can cut here,
right,
but just complete across the board getting rid of it without at least coming back and replacing that, because I like the money coming back to the local ISDs.
I agree.
Because I trust the school board members we vote for to decide those things and to put people in place to decide those things and make those decisions. But at the same time, like as an American citizen, you look at that and you say, well, what if some ISD out there says, well, we don't want black kids coming to our schools? Like there has to be something to step in at the federal level at that point, as there has been in the past.
Correct.
To take care of things like that.
Correct.
Or if they say, hey, no disabled kids can come to our school, like to make a statement like that, like there has to be something that steps in that we collectively as Americans, as citizens of this whole country say, no, just because you're local, that doesn't mean you get to make that call. You know, there's a happy medium there of a place for a federal presence for those types of things, but I think everything else should be at the local level.
And I think too, like if we learned anything from COVID, is that our local officials are the ones that are going to step in and help take care of stuff. Whether it's the mayors, whether it's your school boards, whether it's your dadgum governor. I mean, I don't think half the country knew how much power the actual mayors of cities have and the governors have. When
commissioner's court.
Yeah. And like that stuff matters. Yeah. And it's stuff that like I preach about, but it's like, Coach Smith, you're just a government teacher. You're just a history teacher. That doesn't really matter, but it does. It does matter. And so like swinging back to you noticed, or hold on, let's check real quick. So as of this morning, he had not selected a Department of Education person.
No.
So right now there's been 13 announced appointments, and 11 are open. And the Department of Education has not been selected yet. I want to go back a little bit too about the history of these appointments of these secretaries. I didn't realize that these people don't have to be experts in their fields until Betsy DeVos or DeVos or whatever. Oh gosh, yes. Like I didn't realize that you don't have to have an education background in order to be the Secretary of Education. And like we look at like oh gosh, I wish I could remember who it was.
Well, that goes across the board.
It goes across the board, like the National Health Services that.
Oh gosh, yes.
That is being taken over by RFK. Yeah. I look at that person.
HHS.
I can't remember who it is. But has zero background.
Right.
Has zero background in that.
And that's the thing. They want to say that RFK doesn't have, and that's another appointee we can talk about, does not have government experience, but that's the idea. Like neither did Trump before he became president. It was his first ever elected position. He's president of the United States. Like that's the whole idea of Trump and what people were voting for in our country this time, to say, hey, we don't need these government bureaucrats who are just going to pad their wallets and their friends' wallets. Like, find me someone better who's been more focused on health the last however many decades than RFK Jr. Like, that's been his passion. Yeah. You want to find people who are passionate about that, and like he's one of the best picks. Like we can talk about the other appointees, and I can see, media and Democrats and liberals getting on them and saying they don't like those nominations. Okay, but RFK, his passion has been making people healthier. That's been what he's been all about.
Again, common sense.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense to me why we would have.
If you're trying to find somebody to do a job, you want to find somebody who's passionate about it, who can do that. You've got, I don't know. We can keep going on about that forever.
But I just think that sometimes we forget that these people have a lot of power. And when he put Betsy DeVos in there as the Department of Education, and she has zero background in that area, and she's talking about vouchers, and it's very obvious that like she just like her kids attend a private school. And I'm not saying there's anything wrong with a private school, but at the same time, like I literally work in a public education system, and like this person who's making decisions for me and over me. Yeah. I mean, way, way, way up the ladder, but essentially she's my boss.
She's setting the agenda.
And how can you dare tell me what I'm supposed to be doing, instructing these kids that you have no idea or have had any experience instructing? And that frustrates me.
It does. And you look at Pete Hegseth for Secretary of Defense, and they're trying to talk about, oh my gosh, it's almost interception. He's trying to talk about his qualifications, but Obama had Ash Carter in there who'd never served.
Yeah.
You know, like, come on. Like, I realize someone serving in the military by itself does not qualify you to be Secretary of Defense. It is a great qualification, and honestly, I don't want anyone in there who hasn't served. Like, it is a civilian position, 100%. You're not the Joint Chiefs of Staff, but I don't want anyone there who hasn't served as Secretary of Defense. But he's a war veteran, a medal-winning war veteran, and you look at what he's written. You need to, if you haven't, and I encourage everyone to look at some of his writing. He has stood up. He's made it his mission since he got out of the service to stand up for veterans, and he has written about it and about mental health for veterans. And I just want to say, like, I feel like he's someone, when you talk about working with Vivek and Elon, we have all of this waste. The DOD can't account for where their money has gone, and we have veterans living on food stamps and who are homeless. Like, that doesn't add up. And I feel like he is someone who will make it part of his mission to fix that, not just for the current, not for building the military we're going to need, using the military we have now, but taking a look at those who have served before and saying, as a country, we have to do better.
So we can talk about that and then head into Tulsi after this. Do you feel like there's a shift visibly, and then maybe also in the undertones of getting more Iraqi war veterans and Afghani war veterans in government?
I haven't thought about that.
So, like,
But
let's just
Tulsi.
Yeah. You have Dan Crenshaw. I mean, I know that's probably a bad.
I like that guy though.
I mean, I like him, but he kind of came under fire there for the end.
Yeah.
Ratcliffe was in there.
That guy. We keep going with what you're talking about. We can
So, I want to. So I was listening to Joe Rogan the other day, and Evan Hafer was on there, the guy that owns Black Rifle Coffee.
Mm-hmm.
By the way, the best coffee you can buy. Don't come at me for anybody. I drink a lot of coffee. I'm looking right into the camera. Black coffee is the best coffee you can drink.
Legit.
Wake the neighbors. 300 milligrams of caffeine. That's the way to go. But anyway, I digress. So he was talking about just like the experience of going to Iraq, right? And he's telling. I encourage anybody to listen to those podcasts.
Mm-hmm. He's been on before.
He's on there all the time.
Yeah.
He's a good friend. They mostly talk about hunting, but the one that they just posted earlier last week or late last week, he's literally like starts off in a dark place. Okay. And he talks about how these bureaucrats were over in Iraq. He's like 26 years old at the time, like in his early 20s. He is a combat veteran. He's been around the block a couple times. He talks about starving children and just some horrific things that he saw. And he goes in and he meets with the Iraqi, kind of the Iraqi Afghanistan. I can't remember where he was talking about, but he was talking about how the chief of that town, they met with him and he was like, he was just evil. There was no explanation. He said, I can't tell you. He said, but as we're going around this room in this meeting, we're literally telling these people he has to go. And they're like, no. He's going to be with the Americans. He's with us. And then some bureaucrat goes and picks him up outside of the gates, brings him inside the gates, passes security, and he ends up blowing himself up. And the lady that he was taking.
Yeah.
And so, like, when I hear a story like that, I think, why are we just now hearing about this? Like, why is this not more public knowledge? Why are we putting people in charge of things that they have no business being in charge of?
Yeah.
Right? Now, hold on, I want to make sure I get this one right, too. The Tom Homan, he's the border czar, right?
Yeah.
He's going to be the border guy, right? He was being grilled by AOC earlier in an appointment, talking about separating the families. And he made a very common sense point. That's my theme of tonight, the common sense point. And she says something along the lines of, did you intend for families to be separated at the border? And he goes back and he says, well, he lists off the legislative purpose of behind it. And he says, ma'am, if we have someone that gets arrested on a drunk driving charge and they have a child in their car, they're separated there too.
Right.
And like, that's okay.
He also cited the exact section of the law.
Exact section of the law.
Yes.
And she had no response for that.
Right.
And like, I don't want people to be separated at the border. Like,
Right.
I don't think that is. But also, there are legal ways to get in.
Mm-hmm.
Go to a border crossing, and if you're seeking asylum, there are steps that you can go to get that. And sorry, still fighting this dadgum cold. But like, you have to be able to, huh?
So you got the man flu.
Yeah, probably. But the thing is like, you can't continue this madness of not letting people be in charge who have the experience.
Yeah.
Like, Tulsi deserves to be in that position.
She does.
She earned it.
Yep.
She put in the work. She did the bureaucrat way. She then got railed by the Democratic Party.
Mm-hmm.
And then now they're going to try to go up against her and say she's not qualified for the position that she's very obviously qualified for.
I don't think she'll have a problem.
I think she'll get confirmed easily.
Yeah, I think she will. Back to what Homan was saying about the border, we're dads. If you are saying, if you're in a different country, if you're south of our border and you're saying, you know what, for my family to make a better life, this is where we need to go. Like, I don't know, man. Like, if I'm thinking that, I'm weighing that cost. That if I get caught, my kids are going into state care. I'm going to jail. Like you've got to weigh that. And those people crossing, I promise, with their families are weighing that cost. And that is a cost. And that's what we've talked about before and will be a focus topic of a specific separate podcast about immigration in and of itself.
Yeah.
Of that whole issue, but the government is not wrong for enforcing that at the border.
So when we traveled to Mexico this summer, it was interesting because the lady that was in front of us, as we started this podcast, I talked about it. We went by ourselves, no kids, first time traveling out of the country for me. And I was amazed at, you could tell which ones of the families had traveled outside of the country multiple times because the kids knew exactly what to do, right? But then you could also kind of observe who hadn't because they were, upset about going through their stuff. And I'm thinking, like, you're coming to their country. You're going to listen to what they're saying, right? So when we're traveling, this is a funny story. We're traveling, the guy, I don't have one close to me so I can put it on camera, but he takes I had my cigar box with me.
Yeah.
I'll show you. I have my cutter like this, right? I have my cutter. I don't know if you can see on the screen. And he goes, "Oh, you cigar?" I was like, "Yes, sir, yes, sir." He was like, "Finger." And he's like telling me he's gonna cut my finger. I was like, and Kobe's like, "He's just joking. Don't do that." But like, I'm like, okay, like at this point, I'm literally just like, okay, if that, I mean, what? I didn't really fully grasp. Like, in the moment, I panicked because I was like, what? But again, I'm there in his country.
Yeah.
And he's telling me to do something. Now, obviously, I would have figured it, like, the process of not wanting my finger to get cut off. But it then said, like, I was just so willing to just be like, yes, sir, yes, sir, yes, sir, because I didn't want to cause any trouble.
Mm-hmm.
That didn't make any sense to me why people don't do that.
Yeah.
And I think that he's another one that I think that any clips that I've seen, interviews that I've seen with him, he's very much like common sense. If you break the law, we're going to charge you with breaking the law. All right, let's go to Matt Gaetz. I want to know your opinion first. I want to know your thoughts.
I don't have anything conclusive. Here's the thing. So the big thing about Matt Gaetz is there are people out there who don't like him just because he is a staunch conservative and he will run the Justice Department how Trump would want the Justice Department run in that line of conservatism and not use it, to be weaponized as it's been used before. But I think he would use it as it's meant to be used and would go after criminals. He is a lawyer. He's an attorney. He's very well qualified. The detractors from him, or he hangs out with Marjorie Taylor Greene a lot. He's kind of that wing of the Republican Party as well. And he has some allegations against him that are very unsavory. I'm not going to say on the podcast because I don't want us to get
flagged,
but are very unsavory. And not just only that, it's multiple, things. It's like something gets thrown against you 10 times. It's not 10 times, but I'm just using that as an example.
There's been 2 so far.
It's like, I don't know, man. But the DOJ, a not friendly DOJ, looked into it and determined not to prosecute. So, which could be a lot of things.
Yeah.
Could be witnesses are not credible. Could be they just couldn't find anything. He has outright denied it every single time. So I am prepared, the more I've thought about it, to let that go. Because he's been accused of these things. He's outright denied them. The Justice Department looked into it, determined not to prosecute. I don't know the guy. I don't know his heart. I don't know what he actually did or didn't do. I'm determined to let that go. On the flip side of that...
Hold on. I think he's had some epic rants, though.
Yes.
So I think that will be very interesting to see.
He's a buzzsaw.
He is.
Yeah.
So on the flip side... Sorry, I know.
That's good. On the flip side of that, I wish, and I feel like is there someone that is just as much of a buzzsaw and just as qualified who doesn't have the baggage? Like, I'm prepared to say fine, whatever, about the baggage, especially when the Biden DOJ decided not to prosecute. I'm prepared to be okay with that. But at the same time, I want to say, is there anybody else out there who's just as good, just as much of a buzzsaw? But, I don't know. Maybe there's not. And I kind of lean towards that's the guy that Trump wants. It's his job to nominate these positions, and it's the Senate's to give advice and consent. So I think the Senate's job in this, and in every confirmation, should be to look at Matt Gaetz and weigh it and see if there's any credibility, anything to his character that would keep him from being an outstanding AG. If they find something, I don't think they should confirm him, Republican, Democrat, or not. In any nomination or appointment, I don't think they should confirm someone if they don't think they'll be able to do that job objectively. Now, the problem is it's politics. Every single Democrat's going to vote against that one for sure.
Yeah.
A lot of the Senate confirmations, we haven't talked about this, you'll get some pretty good majorities. Like, you'll get 90s of confirmations. Like, the Senate will say, okay, I think Marco Rubio will get a very high
I agree. He's
Senate
very
confirmation number. Yeah. He's been a senator for a long time. He's well appreciated, well thought of, even across the aisle. So I think like he'll be one who gets like 93, 94 or whatever. But Matt Gaetz is at most going to get 51, in my opinion. Or does he get less than that? And the whole thing is Trump using him to find out who's not with him in the Senate.
Maybe.
That's a possibility.
But
he's already resigned.
Yeah,
he's already resigned from Congress. He's not a congressman anymore.
He also could do the recess appointment.
He could, yep.
So, I mean,
buys you some time.
Buys you some time, and I think that.
And we should explain how that works for our people who don't know. I mean, if Senate's in recess, you can make an appointment, and that person automatically gets the job and gets to serve until the Senate is out of session.
Right.
So
until they reconvene,
right? Well, through the end of that session, yeah.
And I think that I think with the appointments that we've seen so far, Trump is very strategic, more strategic than he was his first time. And he said that. He said that was the downfall, not the downfall, but that was a weakness of his presidency last time, is not being more prepared for the amount of appointments and people he was going to have to trust.
Right.
And I think that's where, so you talked about the kind of the skeletons of Matt Gaetz. Like, I honestly thought J.D. Vance was going to have some. Like, it was on the run sheet before the election.
Right.
And I kept waiting for them, honestly.
Yeah.
Like, I kept waiting for, like, okay, this is going to be the skeleton that comes out, or this is going to be the slip up. And he never, to my knowledge, he never really had one. And I really, like, I stated this before, Like, I really wasn't keen on voting for Trump until the assassination attempt. And then I was like, even then I wasn't 100% sure. And then he picked him. And I'm like, okay, I don't really know this guy. I've heard of him. But then, like, the more research I did on him, the more that I heard about him, excuse me, the more that he talked, the more podcasts he did, the more, like, he actually showed that he's an actual human and a dad. I'm like, okay, I can get behind this guy.
Yep.
And that, like, the assassination attempt and then the selection of the vice president candidate, I think that secured Trump in his presidency more than anything else.
Yeah.
Because they saw, like, J.D. Vance is a war veteran, or military vet. I don't know if he's an actual, if he actually.
Yeah, he was, yeah.
Okay. He's a military veteran. He's been in a state where there's been some issues and he's had to work through those issues. And I think that's huge. That's huge because I think
he's also run a business,
and
that
matters.
It does,
and that matters. And I'm gonna hop into this too. Like, term limits are coming. Like, I don't know if it'll be a constitutional amendment. I don't know if it'll be this presidency, but in the next 8 years, I'll make that prediction. Before I turn 50, we will see term limits on
mark it down
Congress. Because it has to happen. Like, we can't have the lady that just passed away, and she was so old they were literally raising her hand for her. You didn't see that? And
No.
she was in a committee hearing.
No.
And they rolled her in a wheelchair.
But I don't want to say it just because in case I'm wrong.
They rolled her in a wheelchair and literally raised her hand for her.
Oh my gosh.
God, what's her name?
All right.
I can't remember. I can't remember it. But I mean, like, it's the same as Biden, like, right? It's the same as that. It's the same as Mitch McConnell, right? We can't we can't have our government officials having a circuit not correct.
And I hate to say this, like, and I'm not speaking about any politician personally. Like, personally, Mitch McConnell has value to his family and his kids and grandkids.
Agreed.
I'm not talking about that at all.
So does Joe Biden.
Yes, and I'm not talking about that at all. I'm talking about as a servant, as a representative of the people they represent. The value that Mitch McConnell has is he's been there so long, and people do what he says because he has pull.
Yes.
Because for example, he didn't give a single dime to Ted Cruz in Texas to run against Colin Allred, essentially saying, like, you're on your own, buddy, and if you lose your seat, I'm kind of okay with that because I don't like you. That's the kind of pull that he has because he's been there so long and he's a dinosaur. Like, we don't need that being your value as a politician. We need what you bring to the table to be a problem solver, to reach across the aisle because you have to in many cases to get legislation passed. Like, what are your skills to do that? That's who we need in there. And a lot of times that's someone who is young and new and has new ideas. But then also you need some seasoned people in there. So, like, let them serve some terms. But after a time, they've got to go because you get so entranced. You're only doing what the lobbyists and the people who are funding your campaigns are telling you to do.
Well, not only that, you're in an echo chamber.
Yeah, that's a good point. Yeah,
and you're only hearing what you want to hear.
Yes,
and you're only doing what you know to work.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we no longer live in the 80s.
Yeah.
We no longer live in the 90s. We no longer live in the early 2000s. And a lot of the things that they've been doing over the last 10 years worked 20 years ago, worked 30 years ago. Like we talked about with social media, right? You can no longer lie.
Yeah.
Because people are going to fact check you.
You're going to find your clips.
And
got receipts.
And you can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
And everything is on video. Everything is out there.
Yeah.
And this is a point I wanted to make too, because I heard this in this week, because it's really, really frustrating me that the left specifically is attacking the right, talking about how they're uneducated. And that drives me insane.
Yeah.
Right? Because I know a lot of people on the right, a lot more than I probably do on the left.
Mm-hmm.
And some of these people are some of the smartest people I've ever met.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And so I was thinking about that. I was thinking about, like, why is that the case, right? So I don't know if you've ever taken a graduate level class. So I'm talking about when you go to college, there's 100, 200, 300, 400, 500, 600 is a doctorate level, PhD level. Never taken a 600 level class. Don't ever plan on it. But I've taken 500 level classes. And how these classes work is they require you to read a book, usually multiple books. And then they require you to sit and listen for hours on end to a person who is the supposed expert in their field.
Yeah.
I say supposed because I've had some people who are not experts in their field teach me. So what is a podcast? Like, let's look at the Joe Rogan podcast as an example, right? I know more about Gogepli Tepe, whatever, from listening to probably 10 or 12 hours about that specific topic. I know more about plastics in my human body by listening to that guy talk to experts in that field for 4 to 6 hours.
Yeah.
That's no different than that.
That's the thing. So the uneducated argument comes from people recognizing that Joe Rogan had an impact on the election and that they associate that with like the bro vote of just uneducated idiots out there voting. That's not the case if you listen to Rogan. He has experts on that he talks to for 3 hours. He has them on multiple times. And I may not agree with everything they say, but it is interesting to listen to what they have to say, and they are experts in their field, and they are educated, and that's just like the same thing you're talking about. It's 3 hours of a graduate level seminar, and it's Joe Rogan's podcast, the guy from Fear Factor, who's also in MMA, but also has some really smart people on his podcast, and so
that's how I got introduced to Joe Rogan. By the way, is during COVID, like I'm like, okay, there has to be more information out here than what I'm seeing, and he had these expert on. I just happened to run across a clip of one of the podcasts, and it was an expert about COVID and the vitamin D deficiencies. Yeah. And I vividly remember her talking about how pretty much everyone in the United States at that time had a vitamin D deficiency. It was like I don't want to quote it exactly wrong, but it was upwards of 80 to 90% of Americans have a vitamin D deficiency. And she was talking about how the melanin literally has a direct effect on your vitamin D.
Yeah.
Okay. And so I'm thinking to myself, like, who is this guy? Like Joe Rogan? Like this is the Fear Factor guy, right? Same thing you just said. And so that's when then I like started listening, and then I got to some of the not so politically correct ones because they exist. Yeah. But then I also got introduced to people that I had no idea even existed.
Right.
And that is what they so miscalculated about the podcasts, is because literally if you sit and you listen to a Joe Rogan podcast, you're going to be, one, entertained. Two, you're also going to find out something that you probably had no idea about. And I think that there are multiple of those that are just like that.
Right.
Right. And so I think that is something that they so miscalculated in their approach to this election.
Yeah. Here's another caveat for Rogan is that he doesn't sit and listen and just accept everything they say. Right. He'll push back, and his producer is sitting there looking stuff up the whole time. Someone will say, well, I saw this clip or so-and-so said that. Well, Jamie, his producer, is right there typing it in and putting it up on the screen and finding it, saying, no, actually, he said this, and he'll call him out right there.
Right.
Like we were talking about before, he didn't do that as much with Trump. He did a little bit, asking deeper, probing questions, but he did with J.D. Vance.
Right.
He has done with everyone else that's on there. So it's not like he has people that claim to be experts or maybe experts come talk about things. He pushes back.
Right.
And fact checks them live and then says, now what do you say?
And I think that for Trump, he was setting the ground for Kamala to come on.
Trying to be fair.
Because he realized, and I'm putting thoughts in his own head, but I'm also understand politics a lot. I mean, we both understand politics and how it works. Had he fact checked everything that Trump done, she would not have gone.
She definitely would have come on.
She definitely wouldn't. Yeah, there would have been no chance.
And he wanted her to, so he's trying to keep that door open.
And I think the whole point of him fact checking J.D. Vance was then also when he had Fetterman on. Is his name right?
Yep.
He fact checked him too.
Yeah, he did.
And then there's no way they were going to let Tim Walz go on there. No way.
No, that would have been actually worse than Kamala. All right. There's one more appointment I want to talk about.
Which one are you going to go with? Because I want one too.
Ratcliffe.
Okay, you go first.
All right. So the only thing I have about Ratcliffe is just interesting. He's certainly qualified for CIA director, and I'm excited about that. But like from the local angle, he's a former mayor of Heath, which is a town close to us. So that's kind of neat. Like, I'm sure there's some people who've known him who are thinking about, man, this is our former mayor who served as a congressman. Ralph Hall, longtime serving congressman in our area in the 4th Congressional District here, retired. John Ratcliffe took his seat and served, and then was actually Trump's DNI, what Tulsi's been appointed for, and now is coming in being nominated for CIA director. And I'm like, that is a pretty cool trajectory. And I'm sure a lot of people who have been nominated to positions and served and things like that started as the mayor somewhere.
Yeah.
Maybe
Well, I
even,
think
maybe even
Tulsi
of a small town.
I think Tulsi was the mayor in
Hey,
Hawaii.
Here's a comparison. Palin, mayor of Wasilla, Alaska,
Yep.
and a VP candidate. So I just thought that was interesting. It's a nice local story for us here in North Texas. Former mayor of Heath is about to be the CIA director, one of the most powerful people in the world.
And I think that he also served on Bush's anti-terrorism
Yeah, he's had some
board. So he has the, like, that was, I think it was 2004.
That's what I'm saying. He's well qualified.
He's
He's got the skins on the wall. He's done more than and be the mayor of Heath. I just think that's fun and interesting.
So I wanted to talk about Pete Hegseth.
Okay.
So the Department of Defense. I watched an interview with him, and again, he just seems like no nonsense. Like, he said that you're gonna go in and we're gonna get rid of all the woke stuff in the military. There is a time and a place for everything. There is not a time and a place for woke mind thoughts in the military. I'm not going to stand for you, but for me, like, that is not a place for that. Mm-hmm. And if that's something that you subscribe to, then you just need to leave the military and go do something else. There's plenty of things you can do in America that you can have that and not have that job.
Yeah.
But one thing I do know, and I see this all the time because I work at a high school, is they are struggling to recruit people, especially in Texas when they see, those kids see what they see, right? Typically, you would get somewhere between 15 to 20 recruits from the school that I work, like the size school that I work with. It's been down. I won't go as far as to say exactly because that's a very small, group of people. Mm-hmm. But they're struggling. These kids pay attention. They're not stupid.
Yeah.
They know exactly what is going on. And when they see some of the things that they've seen over the last 4 years, and they're like, yeah, I don't really want to be a part of that. Now, there's been one person I think of, and if anybody who knows me knows exactly who I'm talking about. The person that I want hanging out of the back of a helicopter, killing terrorists, going after the potentially now the Mexican drug cartels. Did you see that? Mm-hmm. Is the meathead football player who is a little bit crazy and maybe had his head knocked a few times, but also is America to the bone.
Yep.
That's who I want serving.
Yeah.
Right? I don't want some of this stuff that I see. That's the person that when I know if I have to make a phone call, they're going to be there.
Yep.
And that's what the military, to me personally, is about, right? It's about serving your country. It's about being able to do some wild stuff.
Yeah.
Potentially. But then also being honored and held in high morale. And I think that we lost that vision a little bit. And I hope that he brings that back.
Yeah, the way I would describe the problem with woke thought is that it makes something that shouldn't be like one of your qualifications. Your qualifications to do your job should be the qualifications to do that job, not because you fit into a minority class in some type of way. And so we have the, quote, DEI hires where that part of them, that characteristic of them that has nothing to do with the qualification to do a job, was one of the qualifications that got them that job, and that should never be the case. Your qualification to do the job should be, you can do this job. You're a strong dude who can kick some tail and is hanging out the back of a helicopter and is going to take care of and defend our country. Nothing else should be a part of that. Like, whatever your skin color is or your gender or whatever should never come into play with, can you do this job?
Correct.
But if we're going to say, no, well, we've got a bunch of this type doing this job, so now we need to add in more of this minority class, it's an overreach, and that's where you get to the problem. And that's what needs to leave is, give me however many applicants, candidates we have, hire the absolute best ones to do that job, and then let's do it. And I think, and I'm stepping out on a limb here a little bit, I think we are at a place as a country where we can do that and not discriminate. There was a time and place in our country where we could not do that and not discriminate against minority classes. I think in this day and age, and if you want to even, bring Trump into it and look at his cabinet and look who he has appointed, you can say that he is pulling up the best people for those jobs, regardless
of their
skin, gender, whatever it is. Right. Give me the best person to do this job. And
I think that that's a huge step in the right direction. Yeah. And I think that I'm hoping that we see a shift in morality, a shift in the DEI. I'm not saying that it's all bad, because there is a time and a place for that. But I just use common sense. When did we stop that? And we have to get back to that. Yeah. Okay. So as we're wrapping up, I have a stat for you. Okay. I talked to you about this, and we didn't get to it last time. I know you're a numbers guy. So this is sports. So Greg Maddux faced 20,431 batters in his career, and only 133 saw a 3-0 count. That's crazy, right? Yeah. So I don't know what the number, what
was the number of batters you faced again?
20,431. And only 133 saw a 3-0 count.
Man.
I don't know what the percentage is, but that's pretty good.
That's pretty dang good.
It's pretty good. So, next week. Any topics off the top of your head?
I think we'll start seeing, like you talked about, some of the other cabinet positions filled out. I'm anxious to see the economic team completely filled out. I know something we didn't even talk about is he's looking at energy and interior, and that's very oil friendly people, which I think is a definite shift.
Okay, he selected energy today. It's Chris Wright, the CEO of the Denver-based fracking company.
Yeah.
So if that doesn't tell you the direction we're going.
But it's whatever your thoughts are about oil, fracking, and the otherwise, that is our economy. That is what America is. So,
interesting. Also, it'll be interesting to see what he does with that, too, because they just found one of the world's largest lithium deposits. Did you see that?
No.
In so it's like the Texarkana area. So it kind of goes wow. If you know anything about Texas geography, it goes right along south of the black soil. Okay, so it goes kind of up into the mountain ranges there in Arkansas, and it's found right now. They've got it in Arkansas. They found it, and then it kind of goes down into Louisiana, kind of into the top of the boot of Louisiana, and then goes down into Longview, and then just north of Houston.
But Elon's going to buy all of that land.
He's going to buy all of it.
Yeah,
and I'm or
the mineral rights to it at least.
And it's game changing.
Yeah,
that's potential game change for America.
Yeah, especially dependence on China.
Have a good week.
Thanks, man.